You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 20th of September, 2024 on Monocle Radio.
It's 5 a.m. in Auckland, 2000 in Beirut, 1800 here in London and 1300 in Washington, D.C. That's the time on Monocle Radio, brought to you by Chanel Watches. Hezbollah face the hazards of having to meet in person. The first European country to have more electric than petrol-powered cars on its roads. And has New Zealand run out of birds? I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. It's Friday, so it's our weekly in-house daily, and the Monocle staffers whose boots fell shortest in this afternoon's welly-wanging tournament were Gunnar Gronlid, Grace Charlton, Flynn Simons and David Stevens. They'll discuss the day's big stories and birds, plus we'll have the latest on an extraordinary week in Lebanon. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and we will start in the Middle East at the end of a week bizarre even by the recent and indeed ancient standards of the region. Earlier this week, thousands of members of Hezbollah were injured and more than 30 people killed in two waves of explosions of pagers and walkie-talkies, an operation generally assumed to have been the work of Israeli intelligence agency Mossad. Today, Israel has followed this up with an airstrike on southern Beirut, which has killed at least 12 and injured more than 50. The target, says Israel, was senior Hezbollah commander Ibrahim Akil, who is reported to be among the dead, along with some other Hezbollah officials. Well, I'm joined now by Yossi Mekelberg, Associate Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Yossi, we have been wondering, since Wednesday, whether the pager walkie-talkie explosions were going to be the precursor for a bigger operation. Does this look like that, or is this Israel perhaps reacting to the fact that Hezbollah now have to meet in person?
Good evening, Andrew. I think, yes, when we spoke last, it was immediately after the explosion of the pagers, and we thought then, is this the operation itself? It's a one-off, interrupting the communication system of the Hezbollah, or what is going to follow? And I think, hearing here from officials, it was almost obvious that this is the precursor of something big. I think for Israel it became almost impossible to justify also to their own people. It became impossible to explain why part of the country is evacuated for so long. And the end result of it, they looked for an opportunity, to put the Hezbollah on the wrong foot, and then to carry out other operations that will disrupt their military capability further.
I mean, it is early days, obviously, but do we have an understanding yet of how disrupted those operations of Hezbollah might be? I mean, we know, obviously, that thousands of their members have been injured, many of them seriously. We appear to know that Ibrahim Akil is dead. I think we can surmise that they can't really figure out how to communicate with each other, and yet today they have managed to launch more missiles into northern Israel.
And yes, they will be able to launch more missiles. It's about reducing capacities and capabilities that they won't pose a strategic threat, or the kind of threats that Israel can deal with that in terms of air defense, but also in terms of carrying out this operation. But there is also an accumulated effect. A few months ago, their chief of staff was killed, for Shukur. Today is the head of operations. So it must have impact, at least in the short and medium term, on their ability to operate, in addition to the communication issue that they have right now. Now, the question is always in this kind of operation, what Israel has politically in mind. Is a certain point said, this is the time to go back to the mediator, Amos Hochstein, the American mediator said, we don't want to carry it any further. We prove to you that basically we know we can hurt you hard, but we want to negotiate how the 60,000 Israelis can go and live back in the north. We want to find a way which we stop the war in the north. But in my mind, they need also to make concessions on Gaza. This is actually one of the conditions to bring back some stability.
We did hear yesterday from Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. In fact, we heard at some considerable length yesterday from Hassan Nasrallah. But amid that interminable oration, did he actually say anything interesting or anything that suggests what Hezbollah's next move might be?
It's quite common with Hassan Nasrallah. Speeches, you can read into it whatever you like. You can take one sentence or the other, and you might understand different things. So the obvious talking about retaliation, that Israel is crossing certain lines, and that push Hezbollah to react. But at the same time, he says that the way to diffuse the situation, to de-escalate the situation, goes through Gaza. So maybe if there is a change in the policy towards Gaza, which I'm not so sure right now, there is an appetite either on the Israeli or the Hamas side, then it might also de-escalate the situation in the north. But the problem with the situation now, there are very fine margins there. And one mistake, one miscalculation can escalate it to a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah, with the possibility also of Iran, the Houthis, intervening. From Israel's point of view, they want to break what they see as the Iranian ring of fire, and they see it as actually right now a priority over Gaza.
It is now more than 48 hours since the first wave of explosions in Pages, which means we've maybe got some idea of what the rest of the Arab world is making of this. We have talked before how Arab governments, at least, have been fairly muted about the prospect of Hamas being wiped out in Gaza, almost as if they don't actually mind all that much. Would they be as equivocal about the prospect of Hezbollah being similarly reduced?
Even more, considering that Hamas is mainly Sunni, it relates to the Palestinian issue. Hezbollah is Shia. It's regarded as an Iranian proxy. So everything that actually by association hurts Tehran as well and reduce their capacity to build their axis of resistance. I don't think that many tears will be shed in many capitals across the Middle East. To the contrary, they would like to see reduced Hezbollah, less threatening. It means that it affects also Syria, it affects the Houthis, it affects Iran's ability to interfere in other parts of the region.
Yossi Mekelberg, thank you as always for joining us. You are listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio, and this week Norway became the first country to clear a crucial threshold of ongoing efforts to calm the Earth's climate. By a narrow margin, electric cars now outnumber their petrol-powered counterparts on Norwegian roads. A key caveat which should be noted is that diesel-powered vehicles still outnumber both, but their sales are also declining and the direction of travel is pretty clear, which is all the more remarkable for a country which is the world's fifth biggest oil exporter by some estimates. And I'm joined with more on this by Monocle researcher, writer and resident Norwegian, Gunnar Grønlid. Gunnar, are you surprised that your fellow Norwegians should have been the first to pass this threshold?
I don't think that most Norwegians are surprised. I think the rest of the world has some reason to be surprised, especially Europe, if they're sort of looking at their numbers. So obviously, it's a big milestone itself in that electric cars now outnumber petrol cars. But really, the most striking number is just the amount of new cars on the road that are getting registered, which are electric cars. That rate now, in 2023, it was 82%. Now it's 94%. And Norway's very confident it's going to be 100% in 2025. Whereas in the rest of Europe, it's around 12.5%. So I guess for the rest of the world, it's going to be very surprising. But in Norway, we've been all discussing this for a long time because everyone just slowly started to see, hey, the government are giving these big tax rebates if you buy an electric car, cheaper for the fuel, it's cheaper there's no taxes when you buy the car, whereas petrol cars are getting taxed out, getting more and more expensive. So from the Norwegians' point of view, it's not that surprising, but for the rest of the world, I'm sure it is.
Because it does seem counterintuitive. It would make more sense if it had been a country like, well, perhaps either of Norway's immediate neighbours, Sweden and Finland, which are not massive exporters of oil.
Well, the thing that this kind of the contradictory thing about Norway is that it made itself incredibly rich on oil, but the own energy that it uses is about 99% renewables. We have all of these mountains that we create hydropower plants from. We have a lot of wind turbines that we get wind energy from. So what we use ourselves is very clean. And there is kind of like a perception in Norway that we are one of the greenest countries. But again, it is largely funded by the oil that we export. So it's one of those things that's a bit contradictory about us.
I mean, that being the case, is there anything here perhaps that other European countries, assuming that what those countries want to do is promote electric vehicles, could or should be learning from the Norwegian experience? Or, as I think is often the case with Norway, is it only able to do these things because it is a relatively small country sitting atop a bottomless lake of money?
I think it is a difficult thing to replicate exactly in other countries, just because we have this large margin where we can play around with how we use taxes, because the taxes are so high, but they can be so high because we have such a strong welfare system and such high salaries, which is largely because of the oil. So that gives us a lot of leeway to play around with these tax experiments, basically. But the fact that it does work there should give other countries an indication that we can do something similar.
Norway is about to become, I am reading as well, a major hub, not just for old school things like oil and gas, but for rather more newfangled resources like rare earth minerals. Your country really is disgustingly lucky in a lot of respects. How rich is the small town of, if I'm saying this right, Fensfeltet about to become?
Also, Fensfeltet is actually this complex in a town called Ulefoss, which is a small town that's around 2,000 people living there. It's extremely small, extremely rural. I visited there recently, and what they have found is the biggest deposit of rare earth minerals in all of Europe. It grows, it's above the second largest by a very large margin. They thought it was the biggest, which was one in Sweden that had about 1 to 2 million tons of these minerals. This new one has about 8.8 million tons. And the reason why this is a big deal is because rare earth minerals are considered to be essentially the essential material ingredient in the green transition. It's needed for wind turbines, electric vehicles, and also all kinds of high tech like your laptop, defense technology, all kinds of other stuff. And at the moment, China basically has a complete monopoly on these minerals, because even though they are actually not as rare as you think, they're very difficult to extract. That's why they were called rare. And they also extremely, extracting them costs the environment a lot. It emits a lot of carbon. And so we've kind of been leaving that to China for a long, long time and not been building an infrastructure here at all and not really been looking for these deposits. But Norway wants to sort of become the leader to change that. And it's one of the big pushes it has to sort of say, look, we will stop relying on the oil with these minerals. But again, the thing is they do release a lot of carbon. Another source where we're trying to get this is from the deep sea, and that sort of deep sea mining is very controversial because it might actually destroy the oceans. We don't quite know, but Norway's really pressing ahead with this. And this particular company, they're called Rare Earths Norway. They're promising that it will be a completely new kind of green mine where it's going to be totally electrified, anonymous, it's not going to disturb the residents, and it's going to be minimally bad for the environment. But we'll see how that goes. They say they're going to have a mine ready by 2030.
Well, just finally, and sticking with the theme of great leaps forward in green technology, this carbon and capture and storage thing, another world first?
Yes, indeed. So next week on the 26th, on Thursday, there's going to be what's called the Northern Lights Summit. It's the 7th annual one. And basically this company has been pushing ahead with what's called carbon capture and storage technology, which has been talked about for quite a few years. And it's the idea that we should just capture the carbon that we emit at the source. So when we release it, when there's construction or making of cement, we just capture the carbon before it goes out into the air. We store it, we send it out to a facility like this one that's just been finished and it's the first in the world. And then we trap the carbon deep underneath the earth. So this new facility is going to trap carbon 2,600 meters below the sea floor. This has never been done before, but it's now ready. There's another company in Norway that makes cement that's going to test this out. There are some concerns about, we don't actually know what if it leaks? What if it doesn't really store that easily? What if the infrastructure is way too expensive? No one's going to adopt it. So we'll see how that goes, but it is another world first for Norway.
Gunnar Gronled, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio with me, Andrew Muller. Now, all this week, the London Design Festival has been occurring. If you are in the vicinity, you might be able to catch up with some of it this weekend. And joining me to talk through what you've missed is Monocle's Associate Editor, Grace Charlton. Grace, what have you seen this week?
I mean, I'm not going to lie, mostly cocktail parties, but that is great...
So it's more of a London cocktail party week than London Design Festival
Design
/week.
adjacent. Yeah, no,
Okay.
It's good. And I know you love design, Andrew, so I'm excited to talk about this with you. But no, it's been fun. There are lots of exhibitions, and London is so big, and there are different districts. I mean, you can find stuff from Clerkenwell and Chelsea to like Shoreditch. So there's a lot to see and to explore, and there are 2 more days if you're in London.
So of the things you have seen, and when you've been looking at design which isn't the design of a little paper umbrella in a fancy drink, what has impressed you most?
I went to this really cool exhibition called Material Matters on the South Bank. And it's, you can probably guess from the title, but it's about
This is textile oriented?
No, it's more like innovative, think algae, or like how we could use clay, and like it's a bit more like heady. I'd say.
I wasn't thinking instantly of algae and clay. That wasn't where I went first.
This is how they want to change your mind. And there was a big discussion actually around how we can use materials from the construction industry, which is extremely polluting and, wasteful, and how we can repurpose it and whatnot. So that was really fun.
Has that become a thing, not just of this London Design Festival, but previous ones, the idea of, sustainability and clean design and so forth?
It is floated. I've seen a lot of it in Dubai, but I would say London is a lot better at it compared to maybe the bigger festivals that get more attention, or, design weeks in Milan or Copenhagen, which are considered, the top. And London is almost provincial compared to it. But we have amazing, which is like really sad for us because we live here. But, that we've got really cool schools and maybe like a younger generation. We don't have these big companies like, the Maltanis and the Casino, who we love. We still love them. But, a bit more of a scrappiness. Can
we cling to some hope, though, that the scope of this design event means that, there has been concern over the last 8 years, for obvious reasons, that people are just going to give up on London and do their big events somewhere else. But this still seems like it's a thing.
I know, and it is reassuring. There was a lot of talk this year about how the London Design Festival felt bigger. So I'm hoping that, I don't know, I don't want to say that the Brexiteers were right, but that maybe the J curve is starting to head north.
The sunlit uplands, we're there at last.
I know, it's awful. But no, like people still care about London, and these big international companies, collaborate with British designers, and they've come here to show these products. They're not launching them here. I think that's important to know. We're not there yet, but they're still considering the British market as something important.
What else would you steer our listeners to if they wanted to take in some of it this weekend?
There's a really cool new space in Shoreditch called Wax. You might have to struggle on Google Maps to find it because obviously it'll come up with like waxing, for hair.
That seems like a very Shoreditch thing to do, to deliberately give a venue a name that nobody means no one will ever actually be able to find it.
Classic. It's the journey, not the destination. But no, it's in this big building that used to be where a lot of waxing and jacquard, but waxing as in waxing of materials, not people, took place. So it's sort of an honour to that. And then there is an exhibition at the Design Museum from the Istituto Marangoni, an Italian institution, school. And they've
Clue
got
in the name.
Exactly, if you speak Italian. And they're showing their students like projects there, but there's also the Barbie exhibition. If you're still on that train, if you're still excited about the Barbie movie, there's more.
I'll be honest, I was never that excited about the Barbie movie, but is the Barbie exhibition adjacent to riffing off the Barbie movie, or is it a whole different thing?
And I'm going to be honest, I didn't love the Barbie movie. I didn't think it was that good, but the set design was so impressive, and the amount of work they put into building the Barbie dream house was really impressive.
And so are you actually yourself going to see any more of it this weekend?
I think I'm gonna tap out and sleep for a little bit. Like I said, it was mostly events. I'm feeling a little bit run down, but it was good, and it's nice to catch up with local press, and it was funny to not be in Milan, to be honest. It was nice.
Grace Charlton, thank you for joining us. This is the Monocle Daily with me, Andrew Muller. It seems arguably counterintuitive that it should have been New Zealand of all countries which gave the world the idea of a Bird of the Year competition. New Zealand's most famous bird is, of course, the kiwi, which can't even fly, which is generally understood as a pretty elementary entry-level skill among the species. New Zealand's Bird of the Year contest has nevertheless become a thing, the subject of global interest, the centre of occasional scandal, and the propagator of one obvious nonsense in 2021 when it was won by the peka, which is a bat, not a bird. Granted that bats do have wings, but the fact that a table has legs does not make it a zebra. Well, joining me to contemplate the results of the 2024 Bird of the Year contest announced this week are two of Monocle Radio's frankly far too plentiful Kiwi contingent, David Stevens and Flynn Simons. David, we do have a winner, I believe.
We do. And this year, less controversial, but not maybe the bird you would expect. We've got a penguin winner this year.
But which particular penguin?
It's called the hoiho, or yellow-eyed penguin, because of its distinct yellow eyes, as you can imagine.
David, it has won before. It is now the second two-time winner in the not very long period this contest has been going on. I put it to you that New Zealand has run out of birds and you're just going round again.
Do you think we should have sort of term limits? Two and done, or one and done?
Or do you mean turn limits?
Okay, we're going to have a few of those. I will note that turnout was down a lot this year.
Or do you mean turn out? Let's take the turn jokes as read, shall we? 52,000
votes of a population of 5.1 million. That's just around 1% turnout, which for most elections is pretty rough.
Was there a queue for the computer?
Exactly. But no, I'm quite happy to see this bird take it out. I don't know, Flynn, are you a big fan?
I'd actually never heard of it until this competition, which is part of what the competition's all about.
Sorry, this is one of the apparently 6 actual varieties of birds you have in New Zealand, and yet you'd never heard of it.
Oh, there's much more than 6.
Then why do the same birds keep winning?
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't be able to answer that. I vote for the same bird every year.
Which bird is that?
It's called the ruru, or the moorpork, which is the only owl that's native to New Zealand.
Has it ever won?
It hasn't won, no. It's still yet to win.
Well, that's outrageous.
Well, you're telling me. I every year it's my first vote, and every year it fails.
When you say it's your first vote, are you suggesting you vote more than once?
Well, you get 5 votes, yeah. Vote for your top 5 penguins, Andrew. So, out of 6 birds, that's pretty much you can vote for more.
This whole thing sounds just very open to manipulation to me, David. I've got my doubts about this entire process. Who did you vote for this year, if I may say so?
While I audibly turn my notes to talk about the scandal, I can tell you who I voted for first.
Do you want to move the notes a bit closer to the microphone and do that again?
Okay, here we go.
So the listeners pick it up. Very good.
Yeah, not bad. I'll tell you about my vote every year. It's the Piwakawaka, the fantail. I love them because they're rare enough that when they show up, you go, oh, Piwakawaka. And I like that, It's a little bit of joy when they show up. But controversies, you mentioned controversies. I want to talk about controversies.
Please do.
More controversies than there have been seemingly, normal competition. So you mentioned the bats. Mm-hmm. I'm with you. I wasn't sure about the bats. I did learn that it's because they're the only native mammal in New Zealand. This is all about native wildlife.
Yeah, but it's Bird of the Year, not Bird or Bat of the Year.
But you can't have a Bat of the Year if there's only one native bat, right?
Well,
it's got to join somehow.
Why? It's just like, it sucks to be a bat. Tough luck, live with it.
2019 we had Russian interference, calls of Russian interference, which were chalked up as apparently just a bunch of Russian ornithologist enthusiasts who wanted to vote.
Who were they trying to balk the poll for?
I don't actually have that written down. I'm not sure. But speaking of who, the Aussies were also in a scandal 2018
Yes, we were.
trying to get a... you know it?
this was the year that the people of Australia, which is to say my people, tried to embarrass the people of New Zealand, which is to say your people, by electing the shag.
Yeah, which did they claim as an Australian bird or something?
I've got no idea. I think it was just the name may have appealed to our sense of humour, which some have argued is not the world's most sophisticated.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The other controversy was, of course, last year when John Oliver kind of ramped up the votes for a very unknown and somewhat unloved bird who did take it out. Now, I said 52,000 this year. Last year was 325,000 votes. So he not only did he push up votes for his particular candidate, but also for the entire competition, which is great.
We should have got organised and got out in front of this and tried to rig the poll for, well, one of the two favourites that both of you have nominated. But we do have some more riveting audio. We do have some audio of the winning bird, which goes like this. Flynn, that's not the sort of noise I would have expected a penguin to make. Having said that, I'm not really sure what sort of noise I would expect a penguin to make.
Well, I know. I think that's the thing. You hear it and you suddenly think, I don't think I've ever actually heard a penguin make a noise. But yeah, it does make that noise. And again, going back to the moorpork, my favourite. I'm really plugging it here. I really want this one to win next year.
Well, seriously, next year we're going to do this. We are going to campaign absolutely relentlessly to our many, many listeners in New Zealand.
I can tell you how many votes it takes, because this year's winner, only 6,328 votes to win it.
Come on, we can do that.
If we have more than 6,000 listeners, maybe a question mark, we could probably manage it. I will mention as well, the name of that bird that we just heard, the winner, means loud shout, something to do with it. It's the noise it makes. So that's how it was named.
The name of it is onomatopoeic. That's what the name sounds like. It does sound like a descriptive term of a loud shout. I feel like I should mention that there is an Australian Bird of the Year contest as well. I assume we thought of it first, really, because we tend to think of most things first, like the Pavlova and Crowded House.
Just didn't do it first.
But I assume it was an Australian idea. But my point is, really seriously, can you both, with your hands on your Kiwi heart, say any of these birds we have discussed are in any way as good as the kookaburra? I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
Really? You're making a case for this bird which 5 minutes ago you'd literally never heard of is better than the kookaburra?
On second thought, now I'm thinking about it, I am going to have a difficult one with this conversation. But I will stand by my New Zealand birds till the day I die. So.
I've got a competition for the kookaburra, the curator, which likes to sit in trees and eat fermenting berries until it gets drunk and falls out of the tree.
See, that does sound like an animal that my people would be absolutely happy to adopt as their own. Has that ever won?
Yeah, that's taken it out.
Yeah, and quite rightly so. We should finish on this, David. No, you did suggest that there is a serious undertow to this contest. They are trying to raise awareness of the splendours of New Zealand's natural environment, which, all jokes aside, are manifold. Do you get the sense that it has actually worked? Because it's a brilliantly designed competition for creating discourse online. It's the kind of sort of whimsical thing that people on the internet like to buy into. But do we think it's actually done any good?
I think that's
apart from letting Flynn know about the hoyo.
Yeah, of course. No, I think that's hard to say whether awareness has done any good. I don't know that whether I think the numbers are improving in terms of endangered species are getting better, healing a little bit. But I think what it has done really successfully is further the kind of awareness of this competition, which in itself is a bit of a snowball effect. So eventually, that should turn around some of our species in New Zealand. But for now, it's bringing a lot of attention to this quite fun and ridiculous little competition we have every year. That I think this is my fourth appearance on the Daily about this.
Well, it's the Bird of the Year desk chief, as you are. Just finally, Flynn, remind our listeners of the bird they're voting for next year.
It's called the ruru, or the moorpork in English.
Okay, we'll start getting into this properly a few months out. Flynn Simons and David Stevens, thank you for joining us. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. And finally on today's show, this week, 2024's Ukrainian Film Festival kicked off here in London under the thematic title of Reflections. The festival, which runs until Sunday and is hosted by the Curzon Cinema in Soho, is an example of the sustained effort to support Ukraine and Ukrainian art while the conflict with Russia continues. This year's programme curator, Olga Sidorishkina, joined Rory Jones here at Midori House to discuss this year's version of the festival. Rory started by asking Olga what it is about the idea of reflection that is necessary for where we find Ukrainian film today.
The theme is very important for us, for Ukrainian community nowadays. I think it came to us naturally, the Ukrainian Institute team, because the previous year the festival had themes side by side, and we were talking about unity, the support which Ukrainians give to each other and which community and UK community gives to us. This year, as we know, the war still goes on and it's changing and it's became more even brutal some way. We're trying to reflect what happened to us, and these changes and transformation happened to Ukrainian society during these 2.5 years, because they obviously have a big impact on our lives, daily lives, if it's displaced Ukrainians or Ukrainians who are staying in Ukraine. Also, through films, we're trying to reflect and see these changes in our society and how world is also changing with us, because, the situation, I believe you understand what I'm talking about.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Well, you kind of touched on it there. It's no secret that a film as art can be a form of soft power. It certainly has influence, and demonstrations of talent from any countries often translate into influence and getting across messages. Do you feel that that's a big part of this festival, especially for Ukraine?
Yes, definitely. It's one of our aims, obviously. And also, if to talk about soft power of the films, I want to emphasize one particular film in our program. It's an opening film, Klondike, by Ukrainian film director Marina Ergorbach. So this film was released in 2022 at the Berlinale Film Festival, just a few weeks before the full-scale invasion. And I was there in the Berlinale premiere, and I've seen how we already had this tension, we already had this news that something is coming. And this film reflects about the early stage of Russian occupation of Donbass region. And that was some kind of a cruel prophecy to all of us, to what is coming. And this makes this film, which is made before the full-scale invasion, still important today. And it's also emphasizing very important and dark date in history that was about the droning of Malaysian aircraft by Russian missile.
Yeah, no, that film is definitely a highlight of the lineup from what I've seen. And absolutely, now that we're talking about the films, actually, another that's on there, Earth, the 1930 film, is being presented with a new score, from what I understand. What attracted you to that film? What made you want to include that one in this list? Obviously, you've delved into the archive there.
Okay, so Earth was made by prominent Ukrainian film director, Soviet Ukrainian film director. It's a need to understand this thing, Alexander Dovzhenko. And this year is an anniversary of 130 years since his birthday. And also the most important film institution in Ukraine, its National Archive, was called by his name, Dovzhenko Center, and in 30 years how Dovzhenko Center was founded. So we wanted to emphasize this importance of this figure and his heritage, this very controversial, actually, film, because it's a very Soviet film on one hand, but it's a need to emphasize that this film was banned 9 days after it was released. So it was made like very Soviet propaganda type of film about collectivization in the village, but through the artistic perspective, through the aesthetic, the deep attachment of the film director to Ukrainian heritage, it was anti-Soviet at the same time. So that's hard to understand, but definitely when I seen it for the first time in my life, I was shocked because I couldn't believe the Soviet film director made this type of film. And the score made by Daha Braha, especially for this film a few years ago, they made the score for Dovzhenko Center.
I can't remember who quite said it, but there was a quote saying about no art worth making only has one clear message. It sounds like that's very much the case here as well. Like, it's initially from a Soviet director, but it comes all the way back around to being anti-Soviet because of the way it's been made and the context of the time.
Yeah, definitely. And also nowadays, when we're looking back to the perspective of our film heritage, and there definitely was Ukrainian film director who was working during Soviet times, and he was like a true believer. But on the other hand, he was a Ukrainian and he loved his country. And it's these controversial things we can reflect now, and we can analyze our past and heritage to work with it better, to understand ourselves better, and to talk about our stories.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess essentially to wrap up my final question, obviously London has shown a lot of support for Ukraine in the arts, especially in recent years, including fashion weeks, even this year in fall winter for February. Of course, it's just the fashion week has just returned to Kiev, which is obviously an amazing step. But what do you think it is about London that works so well in celebrating Ukrainian art?
Oh, billions of things, to be honest. I'm here in London just 2 years. I arrived here in August 2022. And the first thing I've seen is like Ukrainian colors are everywhere. I was feeling like I'm welcomed. And secondly, I started to work with Ukrainian Institute London to collaborate with different platforms here, mostly about films. And I've seen lots of support from different independent places and also states. But to talk about Ukrainian art, I would like to emphasize the exhibition. I think a few months ago it was opened in Royal Academy in the Eye of the Storm, and it's dedicated to Ukrainian modernism. It's absolutely extraordinary work of different curators, and it's explained the art of Ukrainian artists at the early 20s of the last century, 2030s, I guess. Yes, and these big projects in the Royal Academy, alongside with the small, unique initiatives and volunteering projects to support Ukraine, that's what I see everywhere, and I'm happy that it's continuing.
That was Olga Sidoroshkina from the Ukrainian Film Festival speaking to Rory Jones at Midori House. And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Gunnar Grunlund, Grace Charlton, David Stevens and Flynn Simons, also to Yossi Mekelberg. Today's show was produced by Monica Lillis and researched by Sana Jamani. Our sound engineer was Flynn Simons. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening and have a great weekend.
2024 is a pivotal year for global politics. Meanwhile, conflict, climate change, and AI dominate the headlines. What do these global stories mean for you? The Financial Times offers fearless thinking in defining moments. Its trusted journalists deliver impartial analysis on the world's biggest news events, helping you to form your own bold opinions. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.